Hi everyone, welcome to ECED and 190, Observation and Assessment. This week we're going to be talking about time and event samples. So there are a few different options for your assignments this week, and I thought it might be nice for us to go over these three options together and just talk a little bit about what they're about and what you're going to learn from them. So there are three different options that you have for your assignments. You have a little bit of choice this week. We're going to talk about ABC event samples, and then time samples. So those are the three things we're going to talk about. And all of these are methods for observing either teachers or children in a classroom. Okay, so let's start with an ABC event sample. So I've included a snapshot of a partially completed ABC event sample. You'll notice I didn't fill out the top parts with the age level, the child age, the date, and all that, but you will fill that in when you turn this in. And so the purpose of this is to be used to interpret what's happening with a specific child before and after a specific behavior. So this is for a behavior that's probably happening relatively frequently, and you're kind of trying to dissect and interpret maybe what's causing it and what happens afterwards to gain a deeper understanding of the behavior and how to better support the child. And so in the first column, you'll see I've noted the time, and here's where we come into the ABC part of it. So here's a little definitions of them all. So the antecedent is the A, and that's just what happens before the behavior. And the B is the behavior. So what is the child doing the event during the event? And then the C is the consequence. So what happens after the consequence? So this sometimes might be a maintaining consequence. So that's when a child is really persisting on a specific behavior because that behavior has worked in the past. So let's go back to our event sample form. And so you'll see the antecedent is the teacher gave a 5-minute warning before the transition to clean up from free choice. So that's what's going on. And then the B, the behavior, is the child begins crying and knocks over some blocks. Then the child refuses to put blocks away when the teacher calls for cleanup time. So that's the B, that's the behavior. And so the consequence is the child ends up crying throughout cleanup time. And the maintaining consequence is that the child does not clean up and someone else does it for the child. And so you can see from this that you can understand what's happening before the event, during the event, and after the event. And you can use this to interpret what's going on and how to move past that. All right. So the next kind of sample is an event sample. And the purpose of this is to keep track of the persistence of events by teachers as well as children. So you might use this if you are giving a teacher feedback to be able to observe them and say, hey, here's some things that I noticed. And so there are a couple different areas in this one. So again, the top part is, the basic information, the date, the age, the teachers, and all that. And then it says teacher interactions with student. Make a slash mark each time the teacher provides a positive or negative interaction. And so you do this with two students. So you pick a target student, and there are two categories under the target student. Teacher interactions when the student is behaving appropriately, and teacher interactions when the student is behaving inappropriately. And all you do for this is make a slash every time you see a teacher interacting with a child when they're behaving appropriately. So if they interact with the child 4 times during appropriate behavior, you make 4 slashes. And if they interact with the student every time they behave inappropriately, then you make as many slashes as that happens. And you might set out a specific time window. You can determine the time window that you're going to do this observation. Then you also record the ratio of teacher interactions with the student, how many positives and how many negatives. And then you're going to do the same thing with a comparison student. So you can see the form's a little bit cut off. You have the same thing but for a comparison student. And so when you're doing this, you can use this to evaluate and say, hey, is the teacher giving the child too much negative attention, or is there a lack of attention altogether? And so this is a very systematic way, an objective way to be able to evaluate that. Okay, so let's talk about a time sample. So a time sample is used to see the frequency of events over time. So you want to see what activities are kids participating in the most. And you might do this over a 1-hour period, and every 10 minutes you want to make a tally mark in the box describing what children's activity is. And so you can do this with your children during a free choice time. And so every 10 minutes, make a tally mark in the box describing what children are doing. And so as you're doing this, or after you're finished doing this, you can evaluate, hey, do I need to change some of the activities in my classroom? Do I need to gain the children's interest through new activities in the classroom? Are there some activities that are being more used and some activities that are being less used? Now you can also use this form to find out if there are children who are watching or wandering. And so I've given you some not some definitions, but some interpretations of what to do when children are watching. So if they are hovering and not necessarily joining in games, but instead watching to see what the other children are doing, that can mean any number of things. So that can mean they're waiting to join into a game, they're just waiting for the right moment, they're waiting for a play script to see if that's something they want to jump in on. English language learning children, so children whose their second language is English, might hold back from engaging, and that's completely normal for a child, child who is ELL. However, if children are wandering, that might indicate that materials and activities are not really developmentally appropriate, and maybe the activities are too far above the level of the children in your classroom, or they might be too far below the level of the children in your classroom. So that might be an indicator that you might want to switch things up and find some things that gain the children's interest and that are developmentally appropriate for children. Okay, so what are your next steps? So your next steps are you need to evaluate, hey, how can I best use this information? Do you need to describe children's behavior? Do you need to support teachers? And use that to drive your decision of which assignment you're going to do this week. So choose a time or an event sample to complete, and then I want you to write a 1-page reflection on what you learned from your observation and upload that, and that is what you're doing this week. And as usual, please feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions at all about your assignments. And don't forget, I do keep office hours every week, and I'm in my office for you to drop by and ask questions if need be. All right, have a good week and enjoy these assignments.